The night at St. Mary's Hospital was the kind of night every doctor and nurse secretly prayed for: calm, uneventful, and routine. The fluorescent lights in the hallways hummed quietly, monitors beeped in slow rhythm with patients' heartbeats, and the scent of antiseptic lingered faintly in the air. At the reception desk, the night nurse leaned back in her chair, sipping lukewarm coffee, exchanging small talk with the security guard, who had begun yawning every few minutes. Outside, the streets were empty, the town asleep under the blanket of darkness. Everything seemed still until the hospital's automatic glass doors suddenly hissed open with a loud whoosh. Startled, the receptionist looked up, expecting to see a late-night patient or perhaps an anxious family member, but instead, her eyes widened in disbelief. A large German shepherd walked in, his paws clicking softly against the linoleum floor, his head held high, his amber eyes fixed directly on her. For a moment, everyone froze, uncertain how to react. Dogs didn't walk into hospitals, not like this, not alone. The security guard instinctively reached for his radio, muttering about calling animal control, but something about the dog's behavior stopped him. This wasn't a stray wandering for food. The animal's stance was urgent, purposeful. He barked sharply, a deep, commanding sound that echoed off the sterile walls, drawing the attention of two nearby nurses. The dog paced in front of the desk, tail stiff, ears pricked, eyes darting from the humans to the open door as though trying to communicate something desperately important. The receptionist hesitated, torn between fear and curiosity. She had grown up with dogs and could recognize the difference between aggression and desperation, and this dog, while loud, seemed to be pleading rather than threatening. When no one moved, the shepherd barked again, louder this time, then dashed out. Through the doors into the night. The staff exchanged bewildered looks. Seconds later, he returned, more insistent, running up to the desk, circling, then darting back toward the door again. It was as though he was begging someone to follow. The young nurse, a compassionate woman named Claire, felt her instincts tugging at her heart. Something told her this was no random encounter. Against the murmurs of doubt from her colleagues, she stood, setting down her coffee, and whispered, "I think he's trying to show us something." Claire hurried after the dog, her sneakers squeaking lightly against the polished floor as she passed through the sliding doors. Outside, the cool night air hit her skin, and she spotted the shepherd waiting just a few feet away, glancing back at her with a look that almost felt human, eyes filled with urgency and hope. Without hesitation, he bolted forward, his muscles rippling beneath his coat, his paws pounding against the pavement. Claire quickened her pace, adrenaline coursing through her veins, her heart pounding with curiosity and dread. He led her across the parking lot, past rows of silent cars glistening under the orange glow of the street lamps. The night was eerily quiet, broken only by the sound of the dog's urgent paws and Claire's hurried footsteps. Then, suddenly, the dog stopped near a cluster of bushes by the far edge of the lot. He barked, his tail wagging in short, anxious bursts, his nose pointing toward the ground. Claire's eyes followed his gaze, and her breath caught in her throat. There, lying crumpled against the cold earth, was a small figure, a young girl, her body motionless except for the faint rise and fall of her chest. Her face was pale, her knees scraped, her clothes torn as though she had been running before she collapsed. Claire dropped to her knees, panic surging through her. "Oh my God," she gasped, pressing two fingers against the girl's neck too. "Feel for a pulse." It was weak, but it was there. The shepherd whimpered beside her, nuzzling the girl's arm, pacing in circles, as though urging her to act fast. Claire shouted toward the hospital, her voice echoing across the lot, calling for help, and within moments, more staff rushed out with a stretcher, their eyes wide with shock as they saw the scene. The German Shepherd didn't leave the girl's side. Not for an instant, his body tense, his eyes locked on the staff as though making sure they understood this was his girl, and he had brought her here for them to save. As the hospital staff rushed toward the bushes with the stretcher, their hurried footsteps pounding against the asphalt, Claire stayed crouched beside the girl, whispering reassurances even though she wasn't sure the child could hear her. "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe now. We've got you." The girl's eyelids fluttered weakly, her lips trembling as if trying to form words but failing. The German Shepherd pressed closer, his nose brushing against her cheek, as though reminding her not to give up. When the stretcher arrived, Claire and two other nurses carefully lifted the fragile body, their movements quick but cautious. The girl let out a faint whimper, her fingers twitching as if reaching for something or someone. Max, as they would later learn was his name, immediately trotted alongside, his eyes never leaving her, his body rigid with protective instinct. He growled softly when a male orderly stepped too close, but the moment he saw Claire beside the girl, he calmed slightly, recognizing her as an ally. The staff rushed the girl through the automatic doors, their voices overlapping with urgent medical jargon. "She's lost a lot of blood. Check her vitals. We need trauma room 2 immediately." The emergency lights above flickered on, signaling an incoming critical case, and doctors scrambled to their stations. Max followed them right inside, undeterred by the chaos. Normally, animals would have been stopped at the entrance, but no one had the heart or the courage to stand in his way. Something about his unwavering gaze silenced every protest. The dog seemed to know he belonged there, that this was his mission. As they wheeled the girl through the corridors, Max ran beside the stretcher, barking whenever they turned a corner too quickly or jostled her fragile frame. The sight was so surreal that one nurse muttered under her breath, "It's like he's her guardian angel." In the trauma room, the doctors quickly surrounded the girl, hooking her up to monitors, inserting IVs, and applying pressure to her wounds. Her pulse was faint, her breathing shallow, and blood soaked the torn fabric of her clothes. One doctor barked orders. "She's going into hypovolemic shock. Get me more fluids. Prepare for transfusion," and someone paged Dr. Harris now. Meanwhile, Max was forced to wait just outside the swinging double doors. He whined, scratching at the floor, his ears flicking at every sound from within. Claire, standing nearby, crouched down and stroked his fur, whispering, "She's going to be okay. You did the right thing bringing her here." The dog's breathing was heavy, his chest rising and falling in anxious rhythm, but her words seemed to calm him for a brief moment. As the minutes ticked by, more details began to surface. The girl had no identification on her, no phone, no wallet, nothing to tell them who she was or how she had ended up outside. The only clue was the loyal German Shepherd pacing endlessly, occasionally sniffing the air as if he could still smell the trail of whatever had happened. Some staff speculated she might have been in an accident, maybe hit by a car or attacked by something in the woods. Others whispered darker possibilities, wondering if she had been running from someone, but no one knew for sure. The only undeniable truth was that the dog had found her, dragged her across who knew how many miles, and brought her to the one place she could be saved. As doctors worked tirelessly, word of the strange arrival spread quickly through the hospital. Staff members who weren't directly involved found excuses to wander near the trauma wing, whispering in awe about the dog who brought a girl to the hospital. It wasn't just curiosity, it was disbelief, the kind that comes from witnessing something extraordinary. Hours passed, and the fight to keep the girl alive raged on. Machines beeped steadily, nurses moved with mechanical precision, and surgeons worked with intense focus. And still, Max waited. He never lay down, never closed his eyes, never moved from his spot in front of the ER doors. Every time someone entered or exited, his head snapped up, his ears perked, his eyes searching for answers. Some staff offered him food or water, but he refused, too preoccupied with the girl behind the doors. His loyalty was palpable, a silent vow that he wouldn't leave until he knew she was safe. Claire couldn't shake the feeling that this dog was more than just a pet. He had navigated the streets alone, chosen the right building, and persisted. Until someone followed him, she found herself wondering, how did he know to come here? Was it instinct, intelligence, or something deeper, something we humans don't yet understand about the bond between dogs and people? Whatever the truth, one thing was certain: without him, the girl would never have made it this far. And as the night stretched on, the mystery surrounding her deepened, leaving everyone with the same question: what had really happened to the little girl in the darkness, and how had her faithful guardian known exactly what to do? Inside the trauma room, the air was heavy with urgency. Every second stretched to feel like an eternity as doctors and nurses worked feverishly to save the girl's fragile life. The beeping of monitors, the clatter of instruments, and the sharp calls of medical commands blended into a chaotic symphony of desperation. The young girl's body was pale, her skin cold, her pulse faint and thready. Tubes were inserted, fluids rushed into her veins, and blood transfusions prepared in record time. Dr. Harris, a seasoned trauma surgeon with years of experience, stepped in, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the situation in one quick glance. "We're losing her," he said grimly, motioning for the team to double their efforts. Nurses moved with precision, pressing gauze to open wounds, monitoring vitals, adjusting for drips, and whispering encouragement to the girl even though she was unconscious. Outside the closed double doors, Max remained a restless sentinel, pacing endlessly, whining whenever the machines inside beeped faster or when hurried footsteps echoed too loudly. His claws scratched against the floor tiles as if trying to dig his way inside to be by her side. Security guards had tried twice to move him, but each time the German shepherd growled low, his teeth bared in silent warning, his eyes blazing with protectiveness. Even they understood. This was not just a dog. This was her guardian, and he would not allow her to face this fight alone. Claire, unable to step away from the bond she had witnessed between them, sat on the floor across from Max, her knees pulled close to her chest. "She's strong," she whispered to him, her voice soft, filled with hope she was struggling to maintain. "And she has you. That might just be enough." Hours dragged on, the clock ticking mercilessly. Inside, Dr. Harris and his team stabilized. The worst of her injuries: a deep laceration on her leg that had severed blood vessels, multiple contusions across her torso, and signs of severe dehydration. Each detail painted a chilling picture of a girl who had been in danger far longer than anyone realized. Yet, despite the odds, her small body fought, clinging to life with the same determination her dog had shown in refusing to give up. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, the flurry of activity inside began to slow. Monitors steadied, 4 bags dripped at a controlled pace, and the doctor exhaled, pulling off his gloves. "She's stable for now," he announced, and though the statement was cautious, it felt like a miracle. Nurses smiled tiredly, relief washing over them in waves, and Claire rushed to peek through the window to see the girl's chest rise and fall in a steady rhythm. Outside, Max perked his ears the moment the tone of voices changed, sensing the shift even before anyone came to tell him. When the doors opened and the doctor stepped out to update the staff, Max lunged forward, tail wagging, eyes wide with desperate hope. Dr. Harris, exhausted but softened by the sight, crouched down and scratched the dog behind the ears. "She's alive because of you, boy," he said, his voice low but sincere. The staff exchanged glances, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others wiping their eyes at the rare display of emotion from the hardened surgeon. Word of the girl's survival spread quickly through the hospital, carrying with it the story of the dog who had refused to quit. Nurses who had been skeptical now found themselves marveling at the shepherd's intuition, whispering about miracles, fate, and the unexplainable bond between humans and dogs. Max, however, cared little for their awe. He simply lay down outside the recovery room, his head pressed against the bottom of the door, his body curled tightly as though to shield the girl even through the wall. Hours later, when the girl stirred, faintly in her sleep, murmuring softly in a broken whisper, it was Max who reacted first, his ears twitching, his head shooting up. Though no one else could hear her yet, he recognized her voice, the bond between them stronger than any machine or monitor. For him, the long wait was far from over, but in his heart he already knew. She was coming back to him. And as the night melted slowly into dawn, the hospital staff realized they had witnessed something extraordinary, not just the fight to save a life, but the unwavering loyalty of a protector who would rather die than leave her side. Morning sunlight filtered through the tall windows of St. Mary's Hospital, casting long golden streaks across the sterile white floors, a stark contrast to the chaos of the night before. Nurses moved about quietly, their voices hushed, their footsteps light, as if aware that every sound might disturb the fragile peace of the recovery ward. Behind one of the doors, in a room filled with the soft hum of machines, the little girl lay propped against crisp hospital pillows, her breathing steady, her skin now holding a faint blush of life instead of the ghostly pallor she had carried in. Beside her, with his body pressed protectively against the side of her bed, lay Max the German shepherd who had refused to leave her for even a moment. The staff had eventually relented, realizing that to separate the two was not only cruel, but pointless. Max had proven himself not just as her dog, but as her savior, her anchor to life itself. When her eyes finally fluttered open, the first thing she saw was his face, his soulful amber eyes watching her with an intensity that no human words could match. Her lips trembled, her throat dry, but she managed to whisper, "Max," and the sound of his name brought a ripple of relief and awe to everyone in the room. The doctors leaned in, checking her vitals, but it was Max's tail, thumping softly against the sheets, that signaled to all that a miracle had truly taken place. As the hours passed and her strength returned bit by bit, fragments of the truth began to emerge. Her name was Lily, just 12 years old, and she had been playing near the edge of the woods behind her home when she slipped, tumbling down a steep embankment, striking rocks and branches before hitting the ground hard. Injured, bleeding, and too weak to climb back up, she had lain there helpless, the forest closing in around her, darkness swallowing the last of her courage. But Max had not left her. He had licked her face, wind for her to stay awake, and when her eyes finally closed in exhaustion, he had made a decision, one born not of training, but of love. He had run. Through the night, guided by instinct and memory, he had raced across fields, followed the scent of roads, dodged cars, and crossed blocks until he found what he knew could save her, the glowing lights of the hospital. No one could explain how he had known, how he had chosen the one place where humans would understand what needed to be done, but the evidence was undeniable. He had led Claire and the staff directly to Lily, and without his intervention, the doctors admitted she would not have survived. Word of the miraculous rescue spread beyond the hospital walls within hours. Local news stations arrived, cameras rolling, reporters eager to capture the story of the heroic dog who had outsmarted the odds. Children from the pediatric wing pressed their faces to the glass windows of Lily's room, waving excitedly at Max, who returned their smiles with wagging tail and quiet dignity. The hospital staff, hardened by years of emergencies, couldn't help but soften at the sight. Their spirits lifted by the living proof of loyalty and love, lying curled at the foot of Lily's bed. Even Dr. Harris, usually stoic and unsentimental, admitted in a rare moment of candor that dog saved her as surely as any of us did, maybe more. As Lily regained her strength, she reached often for Max's fur, her small hands buried in the warmth that had carried her through the longest night of her life. Reporters wanted interviews, photos, stories, but for her, none of that mattered. All that mattered was that Max had refused to give up on her, had risked everything to find help, and had brought her home again. The hospital began referring to him as a guardian angel in fur, and the story touched hearts across the community and beyond, proving that sometimes the greatest heroes walk on four legs. And so, in that hospital room, surrounded by machines and people, it became clear to everyone present that Max was more than just a dog. He was family, protector, and lifesaver all in one.